All right, so multiplication of fraction, what does it mean? So a couple things we have to identify is what is a fraction and what is multiplication. So again, we're going to go with our usual fractions are equal parts of the whole. Now, with multiplication, we had a couple of ways of saying what multiplication was. One of them was the idea of repeated addition. That doesn't always work with fractions. But another thing we had was groups of, like think about two groups of three. That was how we figured out what 2 times 3 was. So we're going to try that version here. So multiplication means groups of. And let's see, I'm going to start off with the problem 1/3 times 3/4. So then to figure out how to come up with the answer here and why that should be the answer, I'm just going to rewrite this as 1/3 groups of 3/4. So basically I'm being asked here, I need to find 1/3 groups of 3/4. Well, before I can find 1/3 of something, I need to see it. So first thing we have to do here is draw the 3/4, because I can't find 1/3 of it until I see the 3/4. So I'm going to make a little note here. First, find 3/4. Okay, I'm just going to draw 3/4, and I'm going to do that with my little cakes. Then we'll try it with the pattern blocks. I'm going to cut this into fourths, and then I'm going to say here is 1, 2, 3/4. Okay, so I'm going to make a little blue check right there. I just got the 3/4. I think I can find 1/3 of it now. I'm going to do that in red. So this right here is my 3/4. 1/3 of it would just be this one. Oh, no, just one of them, right? I don't even need two of them. That is 1/3 of that group. Yes. That right there, this block right here is 1/3 of 3/4. What is a fraction again? Equal parts of a whole. Okay, so that chunk right there is what part of a whole? It is 1/4. So that tells me that 1/3 times 3/4 has to be 1/4 of the whole. Why? Because multiplication means groups of, and a fraction is an equal part of the whole. Let's try it again with the pattern blocks. We're going to do the same problem with the pattern blocks. All right, let's see. What are we going to do for pattern blocks here? Reset. Before we were using that as a whole, but none of these pieces here are a fourth of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, 2 of them are now a whole. If 2 of these is one whole, then this would be 3/4. So let me just put that in my book so I can make some notes on it. All right, so here are some notes. I'm trying to show 1/3 times 3/4. And what that means is, what is 1/3 groups of 3/4? To solve this, I had to let 2 yellow hexagons be a whole. At least if I want to use pattern blocks to do this. hexagons. No. And then I can say 3 red trapezoids are 3/4. Now, since I know what that group of 3/4 looks like, I can look at that and say, okay, what's 1/3 of that? Well, this piece right here, so 1 red hexagon, or red trapezoid, sorry, is 1/3 of that 3/4. Or I could say that one figure is 1/4 of the whole. It doesn't matter what I decide the whole is going to be, whether it's a square cake, whether it's a circle, whether it's 2 hexagons, it's always going to work out this way. The answer is always going to come out to be 1/4. Let's look at this backwards. What if instead I said, oh, okay, what's 3/4 times 1/3? Now we know with whole numbers, it doesn't matter the order you multiply. That doesn't necessarily the same rule applies to fractions, less check. So this right here would mean what is 3/4 of 1/3? So in order to answer this one, the first thing we need to do is show what 1/3 looks like so we can find 3/4 of it. Do we want to use a cake drawing or do we want to use the pattern blocks? Yeah. Blocks, okay. So we need, with the pattern blocks, to be able to show 1/3. Let's stick with the 2 hexagons as a whole. That makes it a little harder and more exciting. So let's pull these off. Delete those guys. All right, let's see. So I need to show 1/3. Well, that's 1/3 of a single hexagon. So I guess 2 of them would be 1/3 of the double hexagon. Let's see if we believe that. I'm going to mess around here for a second to try and determine that's true. When I put these 2 blue pieces together right there, anybody know what that shape is called? It's got a special name, often is used in the military or for a gas station. It's called a chevron. That particular shape right there is called a chevron. Okay. So chevrons are used on military uniforms to indicate rank. It's also the Chevron gas station uses that as part of their logo. So in this picture right here, I see 1, 2, 3 chevrons. I see 2 blue ones and a yellow one. Agreed? So would you agree that 2 of those blue shapes together are 1/3 of this figure? Okay, so I had to prove that to myself, and I wanted to make sure I proved it to you guys too. All right. Let's get those out of there and scribble on this. All right, so here I now have 1/3 of a whole. What's the next step? Find 3/4 of that. 3/4 of 1/3. Okay. Can I cut up those blue pieces so I can get 4 pieces of a whole? Yeah, I could just make those triangles, right? And so now I can just choose any 3 of those. So I'm going to pick this one and this one and this one. So this region right here, let's highlight it, highlighter, is 3/4 of 1/3. Last part of this showing that right there, what part of a whole of it is that? Yeah. we can look at that and say, oh, that's 1 out of 1, 2, 3, 4 equal parts. So that's 1/4 of the whole. Okay, so it doesn't matter the order I do it in. The picture looks very different. That looks nothing like my previous picture. So drawing, illustrating 3/4 of 1/3 is not the same as illustrating 1/3 of 3/4, but we get the same fraction in the end. Okay, so our activity for this week is using different toys, try to justify any fraction multiplication using the ideas of fractions an equal part of a whole and multiplication means groups of. And basically it turns into this 3-step process. Step 1 is identify the second fraction. Step 2 is to find the parts of that from the first fraction. And the third step is say, okay, what part of the whole do we have now? And you can do this with any shapes at all. Now, there ends up being a shortcut to this, which we need to get to eventually. We'll worry about that in a little bit. I'm going to pause here, give you your next mission. All right. So using the area model, if I wanted to show what is 1/5 times 1/3, I would just have to make an area where I'm going to use 1/5 as the base. So if that's 1, then from here to here is 1/5 of 1. If the distance from here to here is 1, then this distance right there is 1/3 of that 1, right? So this block right here is 1/3 times 1/5, or 1/5 times 1/3. What part of a whole is that? Well, this is a whole. That block right there is what part of the whole thing? Well, how many pieces that same size are in the whole thing? This is all one whole. How many pieces of that size do we have in the whole? Yeah, there's 3 by 5 or 5 by 2. There's 15 of them. So this shows me, according to the area model, that 1/5 times 1/3 is equal to 1/15. Done. A little easier than the groups of. So let's do it for one of the problems you were working on. So you were just working on which one? 3/4 times 1/3. So let's do that, and then that'll help you do these next ones down here. So this is just another example. I want to show an area that is 3/4 by 1/3. Now we know from the pattern blocks that should come out to a 1/4. Let's see if the area model shows that too. It should. So to make that happen, you have to show, okay, so I'm going to make this my base of my rectangle, and this is going to be my height. So I'm going to draw 1 across for my base, so that's 1. So as far as fourths go, I'll cut it in half and cut those in half. So right there would be 3/4. And then I have to go up by a whole. So that's about, if that's 1, that's maybe 1's right here. I need to go up thirds that way. So maybe about there and there. So this is my best guess at 1/3 right there. So again, I'm trying to show 3/4 by 1/3. That's this region right here. Agreed? Okay. What part of a whole is that? Well, a whole is 1 by 1. So if I go chunk this out with all of the other lines, let's see, I'm missing a line here. Ooh, that's sloppy. Let me try that again. Not very neat, Gary.
But you have 12.
So cut this in half, cut it in quarters, finish the thirds off, highlight. This is the area I want. What part of a whole is that? Well, there's 1, 2, 3 pieces there, right? Out of, in the whole, 12. So one answer here is 3/12. But if you look at this, you might notice that there's lots of groups of 3 here. There's that group of 3, there's this group of 3, there's that group of 3. So another way to look at this is I also have one of those groups of 3 out of 4 in the whole. So 1/4 can also be found too. So after you finish with the pattern blocks, you're going to try to do each of these as areas. Note, some of them are mixed numbers or improper fractions, which means you're going to have to go more than one across to make that happen. So I'll let you play with that after you finish your pattern block ones.
Okay.
And then we can talk about it. And then we'll do division in just a little bit. Oh shit, hit the wrong button. Sorry. This button. All right, so let's try a mixed number or improper fraction like the last two there. So how about something similar to part C? 1 1/3 times 1/2. So I want to come up with the answer for that using the area model. So I like to do base times height. But with area, I don't think it's a big deal if you switch those. So that means I want to try to draw 1 1/3 for my base. So if I say from here to here is 1, then that would be about 2 over there. And then as far as thirds go, I think that would be a third. So this mark right there would be my 1 1/3. Then I want to go up, so I want to mark, if that's 1 that way, I want to go an equal version up. A little bit too high, maybe about there is 1 up. So then about here would be 1/2. So the area I need to identify is 1 1/3 for a base and 1/2 for the height. So I want to figure out what is this area right here. And to do that, I have to draw in what a hole looks like. So this is one hole right here. And to better view this, I'm going to cut the thirds that way. And it doesn't hurt to keep going and fill out the whole 2 holes. That's okay too. So I'm going to add another highlight in here. Let's use yellow. So again, this is what a hole is. And this is my area there. So one possible answer here is to just say, well, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces in my area. And I know there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in a hole. So one answer here, just by looking at the picture, is 4/6. We could recopy those pieces into a new hole to reduce it, but that's one way to look at it. So what I've just shown here is 1 1/3 by 1/2 should equal 4/6.
Okay.
Now looking at it a slightly different way, just for fun, instead of calling this distance here 1 1/3, I could say that is 1, 2, 3, 4/3 by 1/2. And regardless of whether I call it 1 1/3 or 4/3, I still have 1, 2, 3, 4 equal pieces out of 6 in a hole. If I put those together in one hole that's cut in half and then in thirds, then I'm going to end up with, and you can just put them in any way you want. I'm going to put them in a convenient way here. I'm going to drop them in as 1, 2, 3, 4. And in that orientation, somebody might observe that, oh, that could also be called 1, 2 out of 3 equal pieces. So I can also justify that 2/3 is another way to describe that answer. And what would happen with kids is we repeat this over and over again on different worksheets, and eventually some patterns form. Like they say, oh, the 4 times 1 ended up in the top, and the 3 times 2 ended up in the bottom. That always happens. And that leads to an algorithm once we recognize that. We're going to take a look at division. So before I can do division of fractions, I need to remind you about division of whole numbers. So think about something like 12 divided by 3. For that, I might say something like, how many groups of 3 are in 12? So to do this, I would have to show 12 things. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then in there, I'd have to look for groups of 3. Oh, there's a group of 3, and there's a group of 3, and there's a group of 3, and there's a group of 3. So I can see there are 4 groups of 3. So that makes 4 my answer. So we're going to apply that same idea to fractions. I'm going to try to do that with 2/3 divided by 1/4. So first I have to ask myself the question, that means how many groups of 1/4 are in 2/3? Just like 12 divided by 3. How many groups of 3 are in 12? 2/3 divided by 1/4 must be how many groups of 1/4 are in 2/3. Now, you may remember that we use long division a lot with whole numbers, where we do something like 3 goes into 12 how many times? So we're going to try that with fractions. So I want to take 1/4 into 2/3. To do this, we could either use areas for fractions, or we could use the pattern blocks. In the activity, I show it with pattern blocks, so now I'm going to show it with areas. So what I want to draw is, what does 1/4 look like? What does 2/3 look like? So I'm going to draw a 1/4 over here. So if that's a hole, then I might do this to get 1/4 of it. And I'm going to write it like a division box and put 2/3 inside the box. So I have to draw the same size hole, roughly about that big. And like I did with addition, I'm going to draw the thirds the other direction. And I'm going to shade that a little bit different. So I'm trying to figure out how many of that yellow size are in that green area there. Well, they're the different shapes, so it's hard to tell, but can you see there's more than 2 of them? Okay, so what are fractions again? Equal parts of a whole. Do I have equal parts here? No, in order to make this comparison, I'm going to have to make them equal parts, so I'm going to have to cut them up like each other. So I'm going to cut the fourths into thirds, and I'm going to cut the thirds into fourths. Now I can see to find how many groups of 1/4 are in 2/3. I'm just looking for groups of 3 over there. How many groups of 3 are over here? Well, there's a group of 3 right here, right? 1, 2, 3. There's another group of 3 right there. And I was pretty sure it was more than 2. Ooh, do I have another whole group of 3? No. What part of a group of three do I have? 2 out of 3. So it looks like the answer here is 2/4 are in there, and then 2/3 of a fourth. Because I have 1, 2 out of the 1, 2, 3 pieces I wanted. Here's another way to think about this. How many pieces of equal size are in the yellow region? No, the yellow one here. There's 3 there, okay. How many pieces of equal size are in the green region? See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 8 in there. So it turns out 1/4 divided by 2/3 is the same problem as how many times does 3 go in 8? Because when I made them equal parts, there's 3 equal parts here, and there's 8 equal parts there. How many times does 3 go in 8? 2 2/3 times. This is hard. Division's even harder than multiplication. That's the last part of this activity. Should we do one more? Think you got it? Okay.
So this is the code. And we focus on the first one. Did you check this one?
Ooh, wrong button. As soon as I fix my button pushing.